Welcome to this TubeDuel Original Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the dramatic, absolute roller coaster story of Sharp Corporation. We're going to look at how a tiny metal workshop exploded into a massive global tech giant, and then, well, almost lost the whole shebang. It's a wildly fascinating look at innovation, massive success, and the very real dangers of ignoring the global market. So let's kick things off with a totally mind-boggling number, 1.023 trillion yen. Yeah, trillion with a T. That's the shocking financial loss Sharp suffered over just 4 short years, right before they had to be historically rescued. To put that into perspective, we're talking billions upon billions of US dollars here. So how on earth does a legendary company, one with a 100-year history, lose that much money? Let's figure it out. Section 1. A humble, Sharp beginning. To really understand this massive fall, we've got to look way back to 1912. That's when founder Tokuji Hayakawa opened up a tiny metal workshop in Tokyo. Fast forward a few years to 1915, and he actually invents a mechanical pencil. He called it the Ever-Sharp pencil. Yep, you guessed it. That is exactly where the company got its name. But then tragedy struck. In 1923, the Great Kanto earthquake completely destroyed his factory and heartbreakingly took the lives of his family. But despite this unimaginable loss, he moved to Osaka and somehow managed to pivot his entire business into the brand new world of radio. And wow, that pivot changed literally everything. Hayakawa's company went on this amazing run of inventions. They created the Sharp Dyne vacuum tube radios back in 1929. Then they introduced Japan to its very first commercial television in 1953. And by 1962, they brought Japan its first microwave oven. Just think about the appliances sitting in your own home right now. Sharp was incredibly likely a pioneer in bringing those exact technologies to the public. They just had this incredible talent for taking brand new tech and making it totally accessible for everyday people. Moving on to Section 2, winning the calculator wars. So, moving into the 1960s, Sharp suddenly found itself right in the middle of this really intense global battle to make the very best electronic calculator. And the absolutely crucial point here is just how insanely fast Sharp innovated. Back in 1964, a Sharp calculator weighed a massive 25 kilograms and cost well over 500,000 yen. It was basically a heavy piece of furniture. But get this, just 9 years later in 1973, they released the EL805. It weighed only 200 grams and boasted 100 hours of battery life. They literally shrank a massive machine into a pocket-sized little gadget in under a decade. Talk about a game changer. So how exactly did they pull off this incredible size reduction? Well, the secret was liquid crystal display, better known to us as LCD. Basically, it's a display tech that uses liquid crystals to reflect light, which means it requires very, very little battery power. By pouring a ton of money into research, Sharp mastered this technology super early on. So while other companies were still stuck using these old, power-hungry screens, Sharp's LCDs gave them a massive advantage over all their rivals. All right, Section 3, the crystal clear TV boom. Sharp's early success with those tiny LCDs naturally led them to think about a much, much bigger screen, the television. In 1998, their former president, Katsuhiko Machida, made this famously bold statement. He said, "We will make all of our TVs with LCDs by the year 2005. Now, this was a huge risk. This bold promise meant completely ditching their old reliable cathode ray tube TV business to launch the now famous Aquas brand of flat-screen TVs. They basically bet the entire company on LCD technology. And you know what? Their strategy worked flawlessly. By 2001, Sharp held a stunning 80% share of the global LCD TV market. Let that sink in. Whenever someone bought a flat-screen TV in the early 2000s, there was an extremely high chance it was a Sharp Aquos. They were absolutely the undisputed kings of the television world. Which brings us to Section 4, the billion-dollar display mistake. Unfortunately, that golden age of dominance quickly led to a sort of overconfidence and ultimately a fatal business error. To really understand their mistake, we have to talk about a concept called Galapagos syndrome. It's a Japanese business term for when a company creates highly advanced products that are totally isolated for the local market while completely ignoring the global predators circling around them. And Sharp suffered deeply from this. They focused way too much on pleasing Japanese consumers with very specific features, while aggressive global rivals like Samsung and LG quietly caught up. They started offering cheaper, simpler alternatives to the rest of the entire world. Believing their technology was just vastly superior to absolutely everyone else's, Sharp bet billions on local Japanese manufacturing. They poured $4 billion into the Kamiyama plant, and then follow that up with another $3.4 billion for the Sakai plant. And they did this right at the exact moment the rest of the world was figuring out how to make display panels so much cheaper. Because everyone was suddenly building these factories, the market was instantly flooded with too many screens. This led to a massive oversupply, and eventually a total market crash. Now, what's really wild here is just how insanely fast the prices fell. Back in 2004, a 32-inch panel cost $865. But by 2011, that exact same size panel cost just $149. LCD televisions had basically become a cheap commodity. And because Sharp had spent all those billions building super expensive factories right there in Japan, this massive price drop totally wiped out their profit margins. By the end of it, they were losing money on almost every single screen they made. And on top of those falling prices, Sharp made some major strategic mistakes. They really failed to balance their internal TV business with their external panel supply business. See, they tried to sell screens to other companies, but at the same time, they competed directly against those very same companies using their own Sharp TVs. This completely alienated key partners, like Sony. So combine these poor management decisions with the 2008 global financial crisis, and it pushed this once great pioneer right to the very edge of bankruptcy. Okay, moving to Section 5, the Foxconn rescue. Totally out of money and out of options, Sharp had to do something unprecedented just to survive. They actually had to look outside of Japan for help. In 2016, a Taiwanese electronics giant named Foxconn stepped in. They bargained hard, really hard, and eventually agreed to buy a controlling 66% stake in Sharp for $3.8 billion. But you might be wondering, why did Foxconn, a company that's primarily famous for just assembling parts, want to buy Sharp? Well, as Wharton professor Marshall Meyer explains, it is partly about technology, but a lot about branding. Terry Gou wants a brand. You see, Foxconn already assembled iPhones for Apple, but they were making very small profit margins doing it. They bought Sharp because they desperately wanted to own a famous, established consumer brand name. That way, they could finally start selling products directly to consumers. And the new Taiwanese management, they wasted absolutely no time. They immediately brought in a strict turnaround strategy. They appointed a new CEO, slashed costs, and very quickly closed down unprofitable ventures. They shifted the company's focus right back to branded electronics and invested heavily in Sharp's unique IGZO display technology, which is super well known for saving battery power. Basically, they came in and did exactly what was necessary to stop the financial bleeding and get Sharp back to profitability. Now, this acquisition wasn't just a business deal, it was a truly historic moment. It was the very first foreign takeover of a major Japanese consumer electronics company ever. It was a really painful but absolutely necessary turning point for the whole Japanese electronics industry. It served as a crystal clear signal that to survive in the modern tech world, Japanese companies were finally being forced to globalize and start looking beyond their own borders. Which brings us right up to today. As Foxconn tries to rebuild this 100-year-old pioneer, we really have to ask ourselves, can a legendary manufacturer truly become a massive global brand name again under new management? Will Foxconn's sheer manufacturing power be enough to make Sharp a household name once more? It's a fascinating question for sure, and it's definitely one we'll be watching closely to see exactly what the future holds for the brilliant brand that literally invented the mechanical pencil. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer today, and as always, keep learning.